Oh hey there y'all, sorry, grab a seat, I'll be right there. Don't mind me, I think I lost a pin on my vest and I can't find it anywhere. Has that ever happened to y'all? Losing or having something taken from you? It can be quite harsh, but it's definitely something that can be a great conflict or plot point. You know, in a lot of games, it can be something that never actually happens to the players either. Just something they can do, or if it does happen, it's done far too often and maliciously, where it can end up becoming less of a story beat and more of a consistent threat. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm Rain, and this is Fennec Fables, where we delve into some fun prompts for adding depth to your TTRPG games, to give you some interesting ideas to think about as you play or prepare. But before we really get into this topic, I want to put a huge caveat on this discussion. In no way do I want to advocate for players or DMs to use any of this discussion maliciously or capriciously. I think the sudden knee-jerk response to upset or distress players will cause more harm than good and goes against the intent of what I'm trying to get across in this discussion. It is supremely important to be aware of your table and how you feel their reactions would be, as well as their playstyles and what you want to get across. If the type of game you're going for is meant to be a carefree one, then this sort of thing won't suit that, but in games with a focus on risk and repercussions, then it is an interesting avenue to explore. Anyways, long warning out of the way, I'd like to suggest the idea that sometimes it may be a good idea to put a risk or danger of items the players have, of being taken, going missing, or even being destroyed. In a long quest or adventure, especially to one with dangers to life and limb, the risk of losing important pieces of equipment can add for quite a devilish wrench in the works. When traveling in riskier locations, it is good to incentivize caution and give them a reason to maybe be a little bit more subtle. I think we've all had experiences with a fellow player at a table wanting to show off and being brazen in the face of all reason with whatever new toy or reward they may have, and in some ways this can be a fun moment to maybe show them the risk of doing that, depending on where they may be. To really make things on the level, I feel that we should discuss why these things are a good option for games. In many TTRPGs, one of the core tenets of play is to expand and grow. This can be through things like increasing the amount of danger one may be able to take on through HP or resistances, expounding on the abilities or neat things one can do, or even in your direct influence on the plot through how your PC's viewpoint has been affected through what they've gone through. And generally, these things will remain immutable, but another avenue of growth is in the acclimation and accumulation of gear and items. These can be simple things like money, trinkets, odds and ends, and other rewards, which I've done a previous video on if you're curious, and I'd recommend it, but it can go further into gear like weapons and armor, tech and advancements, or even research and discoveries. These things are all ways your players or even yourself have progressed and shown marked improvements of growth, hopefully from the original start of the game. These are things that they've accrued and now must keep secured, and that fear of safety can and should be, at least in some way, on your players' minds. How much of it occupies their mind will vary on how much attention you want in the game, though. The fear or risk of loss has a wealth of options for both narrative and roleplay repercussions in-game. From the group having to band together to replace or recover what has gone missing while trying to survive along the way and make do with what they can, to them all banding together in a hunt for who or what has waylaid their things, to them working on what to do about things destroyed and lost forever that cannot be easily replaced. These all can lead to groups as a unit having to band together and in one way or another supporting one another, which I think makes for amazing moments in a game. All that said though, as I said above, you have to make sure that this is a thing that your players can be on board with. Not everything needs to have you checking in if it's okay with them to be risked, but a precursory discussion at the beginning on how inventory and items may not be sacrosanct, and so sensible precautions should be taken should be a good idea. As much as I think that these ideas and this avenue of play can be interesting, if your players feel that it came out of left field after assuming that anything they had was invincible, you can ruin much of the trust and understanding they had of the game you were running. There are a lot of preconceptions some folks come into a game with, and they should have some heads up if that's not the norm for them. There are some additional thoughts I will have on actions you should be wary of, but I'll save them for their respective sections as they apply more to specific risks instead of an overall one. I'm going to be going over these three general types of ideas being theft, loss, or destruction. in their own sections with a basic type of scenario that may cause this type of thing to come up, and some ways that you can implement them. And they should work in most any system, as well as some things that you should be wary of and set up for. For my first example, which is about theft, your group of burgeoning mercenaries has just arrived in a rather seedy part of town after their last mission with an epic haul. They're all showing off their coin in various ways, great weapons, new gear, and possible magical artifacts or tech. Their raucous display may catch the eyes of a few groups and wish for those riches for themselves. They've got eyes on them now, and they might not know it yet, but it will impact them soon. How you may wish to apply this can vary from a few deft hands trying to do a snatch and grab, up to a whole setup of them planning a complete robbery next time your players or fellow PCs go to rest. This can involve a few skill checks behind the screen against their passives, narrated verbally with a back and forth, or perhaps they may not even realize until they go for something later on, which can make for quite the shocking moment. For these types of scenarios, it is important to make sure that there is some lead up and forewarning, even in the set dressing and scene descriptions. I'd recommend that at least early on in your game, after you've had some form of acknowledgement that there are dangers. This can be in the form of town criers, posters and signs, or heck, even using rumors or theft among the people. They might even see or engage with some pickpockets or smash and grabs as a way of setting up things like this. For events like heists or thefts, when describing accommodations, you may describe how the doors look chipped and worn around the handles, to how there are scuff marks around the locks, so that perceptive players may key in onto this, or maybe having the innkeeper suggest they want a second storeroom for a higher price. In instances where they do lose items, wait for an opportune moment where they would reasonably notice something is awry, and allow for them to become aware of this before it loses relevance. It is important that they have a way of recovering, if not the exact item that was taken, then at least have a way to replace it with something similar from within their own group, or to be acquired or purchased somewhere else. These moments can be especially dire if it was particularly costly or rare, so be prepared for them to begin hunting down the perpetrators, which can either have its own side plot or tying back into whatever main story beat you had going at the time. As for loss, this I feel can apply more likely to scenarios of nature and mishap. For example, your party has been making their way across a torrid desert. The heat is extreme and the struggles have been harsh. The players have been maintaining themselves off of meager water supplies and are moving at an even pace to get to an oasis on the map. As they're crossing one of the ravine's bridges, the aged rope snaps under the weight, with themselves hanging perilously through the planks, or possibly one another. The remainder of what they are holding of the bridge is breaking. They cannot possibly hold onto the weight of everything they are carrying if they hope to make it up this. They need to make a quick decision. What will they cut loose, or risk themselves all plummeting to a dangerous fate? This is an exciting moment because they themselves need to come to terms, and rather quickly at that, with what they are willing to part with in a rather brusque manner. There is no time for them to pick and choose. It's going to be an all or nothing deal. Who is going to make the sacrifice for the team, and how will they recover from it afterwards? In this particular scenario, while it would be important to make sure that the lack of time is apparent, I would advise against putting down a sand timer or anything similar unless you feel your party would appreciate the additional tension. These sorts of loss are not going to be easily recovered from, and instead will depend on the party and how well they divided things among themselves to deal with the journey ahead of them. This may make them more aware of how they had split tasks between them later on, and will also be time for them to feel clever as they make do with whatever they have left. Many get stuck in a rut and aren't ready to swap things up when a change like this occurs, which can make for a sudden shift all the more intriguing. Depending on the game and style, this can also have deeper ramifications as well, depending on how tied to any one thing someone may have been, and that is part of the fun. With this idea, same as before, be prepared for them to attempt to try and either recover immediately or gain access to similar things in the future. How I envisioned this scenario was the items would have smashed at the bottom of this steep ravine, while some things may have been salvageable if they could even find a way down there. Most would be too far gone. This can of course vary if you would prefer things to differ, but the main crux of this type of item risk is them being the ones that had to make the call and had to prepare themselves for what may arise. The last type of danger is also going to be one of the most divisive ones. It is going to involve the destruction of items in a way that is not recoverable, at least not without the players having prepared in advance. This is actually a subject I've had my own feelings toward, but I feel that in some ways, in certain games, there isn't a danger to things that should be protected, and most don't take precautions to secure them like they should. This can apply to multiple forms of information, documentation, or research, but the primary example that I will refer to through this is a spellbook. Several game systems have classes or features focused on arcane tomes, and usually they are quite powerful, but the only real danger to them being that they can be destroyed or lost. As many old school gamers may know, things like this needed one to make backups and contingencies. I'm sure many folks are familiar with the "nuh-uh, that can't happen, cause mom, actually, my spells are all tattooed onto my skin," or similar types of behavior, which is odd because for all my years of playing and dungeon mastering, I've never actually had anyone threaten a book beyond someone snagging it off a hip holster that a wizard thought was a good idea, and even then they recovered it in less than a minute later. In no way am I approaching this lightly, as you should not go out of your way to try and ruin the fun of your players. I'm not asking for or suggesting combative play at all, but I am suggesting that you should lay the groundwork in your games that there are dangers out there, and they should prepare themselves for these risks. Backups, precautions, and not acting flagrantly with things that, by all means, they should be treating like their second soul. In your games, I'd suggest groundwork on people having lost these things before, and either have that happen through rumors, lore, or possibly even have down and out people asking for help to try to recover from their own mistakes. This way, they can see the dangers and act accordingly, make backups, secure them, and having a way of recovering from the worst possible scenario. Be sure that the tools to do so are available in some fashion, even if it's costly, so that they can make an informed choice for themselves. Whether that is to snag some extra books and ink from a shop, securing server space to back up to the cloud, thumb drives hidden in dead drops, or whatever version of safety for information will suit your game. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, as it were. As for threats, there are quite a few options from just other groups wanting information, whether it be another wizard wanting your tome and then making sure that you can't get back at them afterwards by torching it, a group stealing your research and then destroying the traces to cover their tracks, or someone trying to keep something you're close to uncovering from ever seeing the light of day. But what about y'all? Have you ever had anything like this ever happen in your games? How did it end up coming about, and how did you handle it? Drop into the comments below and share your own experiences with us. If not, you can always drop in with the last thing that you've been searching everywhere for, and if you ever found it. On that note, I want to thank you all so much for joining in with me today. If you can, a like, share, or especially subscribe really helps as I work on getting more of these videos out. I've been working my way to 500 subscribers, and I'll be having a contest and a giveaway when we get there. If you enjoy answering TTRPG prompts or questions, please join me on Twitter or Blue Sky, where I post daily, which is linked on the main channel page. Who knows, your responses may be part of a future video. If you have any suggestions for future topics, I'm always interested in what folks would like to hear, and you can send them to my email on the main channel page as well. Thanks again, y'all, and I hope that these ideas were useful to you and help you tell better tales. Bye!